Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it's time for the last Friday reads of 2023. Believe it or not, the end is nigh. Today I want to talk about the books I've been reading over the past week and do a little preview of my January plans. Hopefully that won't make the video too long, but I was thinking since I didn't really read that many books this past week, because of holiday goings on, that I would have time to talk about January also. And I'm trying to leave January kind of half unplanned, so that list isn't super long either. So I thought we'll just mishmash them together, kind of like when the people in one TV show go over to visit the people in another TV show. You know, like when the people from Happy Days went to see Laverne and Shirley. Um, why couldn't I think of a more recent reference than that? Okay, let's move on. I'm not going to talk a lot about TV. We watched holiday specials, but I will recommend the documentary A Disturbance in the Force. When I made my nonfiction video, I said that was a documentary I wanted to see, and we did watch it. It's really funny and quite interesting, and it's about the making of the dreadful, infamous Star Wars holiday special that was in 1978. And it really gets into that whole era of variety programs and holiday specials, and then how the Star Wars thing was such a big deal after that first movie came out, and none of us knew what it was going to go on to become, but there was this big excitement. And we were watching it with our daughter. We had to really explain about 70s TV and the variety shows like Donnie and Marie and Sonny and Cher. But it's also very funny because they sort of structure it in parts like they were doing a true crime expose. And they uncover recordings and documents to try to assign the blame for this special on different people, which mostly comes down to it being George Lucas's fault. But I will let you watch it for yourself and enjoy. You don't have to be a big Star Wars fan to enjoy it. If you also remember what 70s television was like, you will enjoy it for that reason as well. So I left off last week where I had begun reading The Stone Diaries by Carol Shields, and this was for Remember December under the category of basically forgotten. And I really enjoyed reading it again. It never rang any bells. I know that I read it, I know that I liked it. This was the copy I got in 1993, and I read it, and then I've kept it all this time, and I finally reread it. And I really did enjoy it. It's the story of a woman named Daisy Goodwill throughout her life, from her birth to her death. And sometimes it is told in first person, like an autobiography or a memoir. Sometimes it's in third person and more omniscient. Sometimes it moves around to some of the other characters. But it's just the examination of her life, her sense of purpose and worth, and how she fits into the overall backdrop of her family and the 20th century. One thing that it is particularly concerned with is just the different points in life where things take a turn. And this gets examined through several characters, not just Daisy, but also her father, one of her husbands, different friends, and her daughter. And a little passage that sort of sums that up is here on page 72. Things begin, things end. Just when we seem to arrive at a quiet place, we are swept up suddenly between the body's smooth functioning predictability and the need for disruption. We do irrational things, outrageous things, or someone else will come along and intervene, an unimaginable foe. And that happens numerous times in this book, sometimes for the good, sometimes not. And it's also a lot about the role of women in the 20th century, the value of a woman's work, finding her own identity. You know, these are explored a lot in many fiction and nonfiction works, but it's done quite finely in this novel, and I understand why it was on the Booker Prize list. I enjoyed it very much. It holds up. It's just a good story going through her life. My favorite part was at a point in her life when she is experiencing, I don't want to give a spoiler, but there's a point in her life where she is experiencing a depression, and the narrative suddenly starts to swirl through the people in her lives, her children, her adult children, her some other co-workers and old friends, and everyone has their theory about what's wrong with Daisy, what is causing this, what should she do. Every person who speaks on this topic, including Daisy, when I read it, I think they're all right and they're all wrong. No one's 100% reliable. No one's intending to be unreliable. But all of this together helps describe her character, but none of it really explains it. It's still incomplete. And so I found that to be an interesting theme in this book. So that was the Stone Diaries. Recommend it highly. I also completed my holiday reading last night with my somewhat annual reread of The Dead by James Joyce. It's like my series of melancholy things to read at Christmas time, but such a beautiful, beautiful story. And the other book that I did read this week was Erasure by Percival Everett. Okay, this was really good. I read this right now because I got excited about the movie. I didn't know there was a movie coming out based on Erasure, but you may have seen the promotions for American Fiction, which is, when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, that's Erasure. So I've had this book for several months and meaning to read it. I love Percival Everett, but it just was kind of sitting there waiting around. But this, put a pin in my chair and I had to go ahead and read it. So this is the story of Thelonious Ellison, otherwise known as Monk, who is an academic. He's a writer. The books that he writes are very difficult, inaccessible to read, super esoteric. They're these sort of fictions based on philosophical encounters between different figures from history or mythology, and he goes to conferences where it talks about how their inaccessible experimental junk is the real deal and everybody else's is not. And it's a very sharp satire of the academic world, the world of experimental fiction, the world of what is literary and what is popular. Other things that it satirizes and skewers along the way include academic teaching, the ridiculous salary of adjunct teachers, book prize committee members and their politics and the way that they shortlist books, talk show hosts. There's a person in the book that is very much like Oprah Winfrey. But in this book, we have Monk's problem is his books don't sell and nobody wants to read them. He is a professor in California and he has some family problems that emerge, and he has to make a relocation to deal with some family issues. The family part of the story is really touching. It's a really a poignant subplot that has to do with his mother's slide into dementia and the unveiling of some family secrets. But he finds himself short on money. And he's also really frustrated about the success of a particular trashy novel called We Lives in the Ghetto. And this woman who is a middle-class African-American who once spent a weekend at her cousin's place in Harlem when she was young, and based on that has spun out this urban novel that has been widely lauded and accepted as being the true voice of Black Americans. And he just thinks that it's complete exploitative garbage, and it just drives him nuts that everywhere he goes, there it is, and people are extolling its virtues. And that's this big hit where nobody wants to read his books. So in the midst of all this stew, he decides to write his own spoof novel called My Pathology. This 10-chapter book is nestled inside of Erasure, almost as unreadable as his academic pieces that are also sprinkled in the book. It's ridiculous, it's hilarious, it's over the top, it's It's just outrageously bad. And of course, this becomes a giant hit. Now, I won't want to give anything else away about what happens and what he has to deal with in the aftermath of that. But I guess the surprise in here, I knew that was what it was about. And the surprise for me was the other part of the story about how he didn't just write it as a protest, but also well, he did write it as a protest, but also the reaction that it got and the fact that he might actually make some money from it was creates this moral dilemma because he's broke and he needs the money, and the reasons why he is broke is part of the examination of the topics in this story. So it was very enjoyable. As in the best Percival Everett books, there are terribly sad parts and hilarious parts, and you're just stuck with them all together. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I can't wait to see the movie. The movie's getting really good reviews, so I have high hopes about this adaptation. Let's talk about January. So my January TBR, my original plan was to not have any TBR and just read through the moods. But of course, various projects tantalized me. And so I do have a few planned things to read, and then the rest I'm going to leave to the whims because I have a full cart of books. You just saw my book haul, and there's some things at the library that I'm really eager to get as well. So I'm just going to talk about the planned reading, and then the rest will have to be a surprise. I'm continuing with Bleak House that I started this week, and I am on page 154. I have been reading on faith up to this point because Dickens just introduces so many characters without really explaining which ones are important, and the plot so far has not plotted a whole lot, except that everybody in the story has some sort of connection to this endless lawsuit. Somebody died and there was two wills, and there's been resulting decades of red tape and legal challenges and bureaucracy. And so everyone in the story has some sort of stake in the outcome of this lawsuit. And there's a trio of young people who are the wards of a Mr. Jardins who has, I don't know, I don't really understand the plot yet. I'm just going with getting to know the characters, and I have it on faith that eventually the plot is going to make sense. Right now it's mainly about the young people establishing themselves at Bleak House, and they are also not really understanding what's going on, but getting to know each other and trying to get a good grasp of this legal situation and how all the players relate to it. So I'm enjoying it, but I don't know what's going on. I'm going to be reading Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This will be a reread, and I'm reading this for two reasons. It is the January selection of the banned book club at the library. I have three reasons. The January book club, also referring back to Percival Everett, his new book, James, which is a retelling of Huck Finn from Jim's point of view, is coming out later this spring. So I want to refresh the source material in my mind. And also I'm participating in the 24 and 24 banned book challenge. I will put MJ's video announcing this challenge below. She has started this challenge. The idea is to read 2 books every month that have been banned or challenged and support banned books and protest censorship. So since I'm already in a banned book club, one of them's kind of a given, and I personally am choosing to make the second book always be a children or young adult book, because that's near to my heart as a retired librarian and as a parent of having books be accessible for the audience that they were intended for. The last time I read it was about 5 or 6 years ago when my daughter was in high school, and I think I've read it 3 or 4 times. She had to read it for a class, and somewhere in the middle, she got sick. She had something like, I don't know, strep throat or something like that, where she had to read some chapters, and she was stressed out because she was sick and had a fever and all this. So I read her chapters out loud to her for a couple of days. And that, of course, sparked me to have to go back and read the whole book again. So that was the last time I read it. But I'm happy to read it again. And I love this book. So I'm going to enjoy that reread. Another one is a buddy read. I'm going to read Case Histories because I talked a few months ago about wanting to go back through this Jackson Brodie series and read some other Kate Atkinson books again as well. And viewer Deborah Johnson suggested we do a buddy read in January of Case Histories. Deborah, are you watching? I've been trying to get a hold of you. I can't find you on Voxer. So pop me your Voxer ID or email me how you want to do our discussion, or is it still a good month for you? But I am planning to read Case Histories, which is the first Jackson Brodie mystery. I love Kate Atkinson's plotting. I love the character Jackson Brodie, so I'm excited to read this again. It's almost all rereads on the planned books, and then it's going to be new books on the others. So the next book is also a read along, and I kind of honed in Michael Clark, aka Web of Dust, aka Caleb Trask, mentioned in a Discord that he was going to reread the quartet of books by Lois Lowry that begins with The Giver. And I sort of jumped in and said, I want to read too. So we're going to both read The Giver and I think Messenger. Is that right? In January. But I don't have the other book yet. Got it from the library. And it is a dystopian novel intended for, I think, middle grade, 4th through 8th, maybe, like middle grade and middle school aged readers. And it's a beautiful novel. I guess it's probably my favorite book by Lois Lowry, but I need to reread these books and see what I think overall. And also, this book has been frequently challenged and banned. And so this is my second book for the banned book challenge because I want to focus on books that have been challenged in public libraries or school libraries that are children's books or young adult books. So I didn't even think about that when I said I wanted to reread The Giver. And then when I was thinking, oh, I need to pick a second book for the banned book challenge, I'm like, oh, The Giver. I've already picked it. Who knew? So Michael, let me know how you want to discuss. Do you want to just talk about it at the end? Do we want to talk about it in Discord or just down here in the comments, or I'm open to whatever, but I'm excited that somebody else is going to read this at the same time as me so that I have somebody to talk to about it. And then the last one that I have selected for myself that is I have two more. One is not a reread. So hang on. So I have My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. As previously mentioned, I want to reread the quartet of books about Lucy Barton, and this is the first one, and I think I have found my copies of the first two, so I still am tracking down the next two, but somewhere over the next few months, I want to reread these books in close proximity and see how that changes my reading experience. And then also I'm going to be reading A Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare, which is the first play selected in Melinda of Web of Stories Shakespeare Challenge. She is pulling names of plays out of a hat throughout the year 2024, and she has set up a part in her Discord called the Bard Room. I thought of that name. I take credit for that, but I will be participating in this reading challenge, and the first one is A Winter's Tale, which I've never read, and I didn't pull down my Shakespeare from the shelf, but I have two of them, but I have my collected Shakespeare, so it's ready to go as well, and I'm excited to read that because I've never read it. So like I said, the rest of January, I have so many new books and also older books. There's a couple of things. I almost requested, the library finally got in the bee sting, and I was going to request it, but then I got scared because there was only 3 people in line, and if the three people really read the book, it would come up about where I want it, maybe kind of later in the month. But if the three people don't pick it up, or they go to get it and they go, oh, it's, it's huge, then I got it too soon and I'm not ready. That happens to me sometimes, and I end up having to re-request it because it didn't come up when I want. So I'm gonna wait a couple of weeks maybe and then request it, because I want to read some of these other ones. And then I just have so much. Oh, there's so many books. I'm excited. I'm daunted. There's so much. Anyway, what are you planning to read in January? I am taking it month by month. Even though some of these things might be year-long projects, I am just going to approach it one bite at a time. But I'm looking forward to a new year with new reading and new challenges, and I hope you are too. Let me know what's going on this week with you and what you plan to read this weekend, and have a wonderful week. I will be coming out this weekend, probably Sunday and then Tuesday, with my best of the year and my best rereads of the year. So see you soon. Bye-bye.